28 years. That woman had 28 years with my brother, and she used them like a slow lock tightening around his throat. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. She did it one small rule at a time, until my brother could not choose a sandwich without checking if it would upset the weather inside his own house. My name is Grant Mercer. I am 59 years old, a retired fire captain from Savannah, Georgia, and I have spent most of my adult life reading danger before it gets loud. Smoke tells you things. Doors tell you things. People do too if you stop believing their smiles and start watching what their hands do. I knew my twin brother Samuel was trapped long before he knew how to say it. I saw it in the way he asked permission with his eyes. I saw it when he laughed, then looked toward his wife to see if the laugh was allowed. I saw it at barbecues, funerals, birthdays, and every family table where Samuel slowly disappeared. His wife's name was Lydia Mercer. She was not a screamer. That would have made her easier to fight. Lydia controlled rooms the way a thermostat controls air, quietly, constantly making everyone adjust without noticing who had changed the temperature. She called it keeping order. I called it what it was, though not out loud for years. For years, I told myself Samuel was grown. A man has to choose his own door even if he keeps walking into the wrong room. My wife, Nora, said the same thing, but gentler. She has the calm of a woman who can fold a fitted sheet and a crisis at the same time. Still, even Nora knew something was wrong. The phone call came on a Thursday morning, June 6th at 1:47 a.m. I remember the time because the red numbers on the clock looked like a warning light. Nora stirred before I even reached for the phone. She always knew when a call belonged to trouble. Samuel's name glowed on the screen, and I answered before the second ring. At first I heard only breathing. Not drunk breathing. Not sleepy breathing. The thin kind, the kind a man makes when he has been holding himself together with both hands and one of them finally slips. "Grant," he said. Just my name. One word, and I was already sitting up, feet on the floor, heart running ahead of me. "Where are you?" I asked. He swallowed. I heard traffic in the background, then a truck shifting gears somewhere far off. "Macon," he said. "Room 18. The Peach Lantern Motel." I looked at Nora. She was fully awake now. "Samuel, why are you in Macon at 2 in the morning?" He gave a small, broken laugh. "Because I missed my own life." That sentence did something to the room. Nora put her hand on my shoulder and I stood very still. I had pulled men out of burning houses who sounded less lost than my brother did on that phone. "Talk to me," I said. "Everything. Start wherever your mouth lets you start." He did. For the next 94 minutes, he emptied 28 years. It started with a choir audition. Samuel had sung since we were boys. Back when we sounded so alike, our mother made us stand in different rooms to prove who was who. 3 months earlier, a church friend had asked him to audition for a regional gospel group. Nothing famous. Nothing wild. Just music weekends, and a piece of himself Lydia had never cared to know. Samuel told Lydia he wanted to try. Not join, not travel, not abandon the marriage. Just try. She smiled, touched his arm, and said, "At your age, do you really want people laughing because you think you still have a stage voice?" He laughed when he told me that part, but the laugh had no bones in it. The next day, she called the choir director herself and said Samuel had changed his mind. She told him later she was saving him from embarrassment. That phrase came up again and again. Saving him. Protecting him. Helping him avoid foolishness. Every cruel act arrived wearing the coat of concern. Lydia never had to lock a door if she convinced Samuel the hallway was dangerous. Then came the money. Samuel's paycheck from the city planning office went into a joint account Lydia monitored like airport security. He had a debit card, but she checked every purchase. He got $40 cash every Monday for lunch, gas, and small personal needs. My brother, a 59-year-old man with a pension plan, used the word allowance. I had to stand and walk around the bedroom when he said it. Nora watched me, eyes sharp, saying nothing because she knew if she spoke too soon I would start swinging at ghosts. Samuel kept talking. His old friend Terrell Price had been cut off too. Lydia said Terrell was bitter after his divorce and bad energy was contagious. Samuel had not had coffee with Terrell in 6 years. 6 years because Lydia disliked a man who remembered Samuel before the shrinking. Their daughter Hannah, 25, lived in Atlanta and called her father during her lunch breaks because Lydia was at yoga then. Their son Caleb, 27, lived 15 minutes away and still asked his mother before inviting his father anywhere. "Tonight was the thing with the porch," Samuel said. I closed my eyes. There was always a thing. A garage. A dinner, a rug, a cousin's visit. Something urgent enough to cancel his joy, and meaningless enough to prove the urgency was invented. "Tell me," I said. He breathed into the phone, then started again. A retired firefighter buddy of mine, Miguel, had invited Samuel and me to a fishing weekend near Lake Sinclair. Samuel had not been fishing in 5 years. He asked Lydia on Wednesday night, even though the asking was already the problem. She said no. She needed the front porch repainted before her garden club came by in July. "July," I said. "That's a month away." "I know," Samuel answered. I said that. I told her I could fish 2 days and paint the porch 3 times before July. She looked at me like I had failed a test and said, "I thought this family mattered to you." Then she went upstairs and closed the door. He sat in their driveway for 40 minutes, then drove aimlessly until Macon. That was my brother's rebellion after 28 years. A motel room that smelled like old carpet and a phone call to me. Some people might call that small. I did not. A man who has been trained not to step outside needs courage just to touch the knob. When he finally stopped talking, I looked at Nora. She already knew. She had known for years, maybe before I did. She nodded once. "Samuel," I said, "stay there. Don't go home. I'll call the motel and pay for 2 more nights. I'm coming up tomorrow." He started to object. I cut him off. "You called me. Let me answer." After I hung up, Nora sat with me in the dark. Neither of us spoke for a while. The ceiling fan clicked above us. Outside, Savannah slept under that heavy summer heat that makes the whole city feel wrapped in damp cotton. Finally, Nora said, "You're thinking about the switch." I looked at her. "I never said switch." "You didn't have to," she said. "You and Samuel are identical twins who have spent 28 years joking that one of you should sneak in and tell Lydia no. The joke has been waiting for its teeth." That was Nora. She could name a thing before it had the courage to name itself. "It might go badly," I said. "It has already gone badly," she answered. Then she got out of bed, tied her robe, and walked to the dresser. "You'll need to practice his signature. Samuel still loops his capital S like your father did. You stopped doing that after the academy." I stared at her. "You notice everything." She looked back. "That is why you married me." Friday morning, I drove to Macon. Samuel was in room 18, sitting at the little round table by the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he had not touched. Same face as mine, same gray at the temples, same left eyebrow that lifted when we were thinking. But where I had weathered, Samuel had thinned. He stood when I came in. For a second, we just looked at each other. Being a twin is strange because age does not arrive alone. It shows you a second version of the same road. Samuel looked at me like I was proof that his body could have carried a different life. "You look loud," he said. I laughed once. "You look tired." He nodded. "That too." We sat at the table and began. He gave me Lydia's routines, her phrases, her coffee order, her allergies, the neighbors she tolerated, the neighbors she performed for, and the ones she quietly punished with silence. I wrote everything down on motel stationery because details were going to matter. He told me how he parked, which cabinet held the mugs, where Lydia kept the extra house key, what channel she watched after dinner, how he folded towels, which fork drawer stuck, and how she corrected his driving from the passenger seat. Small things, tiny things. But control lives in tiny things the way rot lives behind paint. "She'll know," Samuel said around noon. "Maybe," I said. "Eventually, probably. But before she knows, she is going to feel what it is like when the man she trained stops responding to the bell." Samuel looked down at his hands. "Don't humiliate her." That surprised me. It also did not. "I'm not going to humiliate her," I said. "I'm going to interrupt her." We made the plan. Samuel would drive to Savannah with Nora that Sunday. He would stay at my house, eat real food, sleep, and not answer Lydia, except through short texts I approved. I would drive his car back to Augusta, walk into his life, and wear it for 7 days. Not forever. Just long enough to put air back into the rooms. On Saturday, Nora arrived with a duffel bag and the look she gets when foolishness should clear the road. She hugged Samuel for a long time. He stiffened at first, then slowly folded into it. That told me another thing Lydia had taken from him. Touch without accounting. Nora pulled back and said, "You are eating vegetables tonight." Samuel smiled for the first time. Sunday afternoon, I drove Samuel's beige Toyota into Augusta. His house sat in a neat subdivision where every lawn looked slightly afraid of being judged. Lydia loved that neighborhood because nobody left garbage cans out too long and everyone pretended not to notice whose marriage sounded hollow through open windows. I parked in Samuel's driveway and breathed once. 28 years, I thought. 28 years she managed him. 7 days of the same face, with a different spine. Let us see what Lydia Mercer does when the appliance starts answering back. I got out, took Samuel's keys, and walked into my brother's house like I belonged there because, in a way deeper than ownership, I did. Lydia was in the kitchen wearing linen pants and stirring something in a Dutch oven. Sunday supper. Samuel had told me she cooked elaborate meals when she wanted the house to look stable. She looked up. "You're late." No hello. No question. Just a judgment placed on the counter like a bowl. I hung the keys on the left hook. "Traffic outside Dublin," I said. Samuel's voice and mine had always been close. Age had made them closer, roughened, both at the edges. Lydia turned back to the stove. "My mother called twice. You didn't answer. I'll call her tomorrow." Her spoon paused. She sounded lonely. I walked to the cabinet, took down a glass. "Then tomorrow we'll give her something to expect." The kitchen went still, not silent. Still. There is a difference. Silence can be peaceful. Stillness means something is watching. Lydia turned slightly, not fully. That's an odd thing to say. I poured water. It's an honest thing to say. Her eyes moved across my face. The first small crack. She was not suspicious yet. She was recalibrating. Dinner tasted good because control and cooking can share hands. Caleb came by at 7 with his wife Marissa. He was broad-shouldered, careful-eyed, and carried the posture of a man who had learned early that peace costs personal truth. He hugged me and paused a fraction too long. "You okay, Dad?" he asked. "Better than I was," I said. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion exactly. More like a curtain moving in a window. Lydia sat across the table managing conversation. She asked Marissa about work. Corrected Caleb's memory of a birthday, reminded me to schedule the porch paint, and moved through the meal as if everyone's lines had been handed out before we sat down. After dinner, I washed the dishes. Samuel had told me he usually cleared Lydia loaded, and then corrected him anyway. I changed the sequence. I washed every plate, dried them, and placed them where Samuel said they belonged. Lydia watched from the doorway like a cat watching a chair move by itself. "You're being helpful tonight," she said. Was I not helpful before I asked without looking at her? That landed. I heard the smallest inhale. "I didn't mean that." "Then what did you mean?" I turned with the dish towel in my hand. Lydia smiled. Her public smile. "Nothing. It's nice." "Good," I said. "Then we agree." Caleb looked at his plate like it had suddenly become fascinating. That night I slept in Samuel's guest room instead of the master bedroom. He and Lydia had not shared a room in 2 years, though nobody outside the house knew. Lydia claimed Samuel snored. Samuel said she began locking her door after he forgot to take out recycling one Thursday. Small punishments become architecture when nobody challenges the builder. Monday morning, June 10th, I was making coffee at 6:30 when Lydia entered in a silk robe, phone already in hand. Management posture. Samuel had described it perfectly. Chin up, shoulders, square voice soft enough to sound reasonable and firm enough to be a fence. "The porch needs sanding today," she said, "and call the insurance office before lunch." "No," I said. One syllable. "Clean as an axe." Lydia stopped walking. Her phone lowered a half-inch. "Excuse me, I'm not sanding the porch today. I'm going to the office, then I'm having lunch with Terrell Price." Her face did something I almost admired. It searched through 28 years of available responses and found none that fit. "Terrell," she said finally, careful. "You haven't seen Terrell in years. That's why lunch will take a while." I poured coffee into Samuel's mug, the blue one with the chipped rim. "You said he wasn't good for you." "You said that," I replied. I repeated it because it was easier than arguing. I'm done doing easy things badly. Lydia stared at me. I could see her trying to decide whether to laugh, scold, worry, or wound. She chose concern because concern had always been her prettiest knife. "Samuel, I think you're having some kind of emotional reaction." I nodded. "Maybe. People have those when they start breathing again." She left the kitchen without pouring coffee. At noon, I met Terrell Price at a barbecue place Samuel used to love. I had called him as Samuel, careful and quiet. Terrell had gone silent for so long I thought he hung up. Then he said Sam, one syllable full of 6 lost years. When he walked into the restaurant, he looked older, heavier, and hurt in a way men hide with jokes. He hugged me hard. I let him. That hug belonged to Samuel, and I was only carrying it. Man, Terrell said, voice rough. I thought you were dead or kidnapped. Little of both, I answered. We ate ribs. We talked about weather, knees, old music, nothing, everything. Terrell laughed twice with his whole chest. I imagined Samuel hearing it later and breathing differently. When I got home, Lydia was waiting in the living room. Waiting is not the same as sitting. She had arranged herself to be discovered. Book open, glasses, low face composed into injury. You were gone 3 hours. Good ribs take time. Her eyes flashed. There she was. Not the helper, not the concerned wife. The owner. I was worried, she said. Were you? I sat across from her, not beside her. You did not call the insurance office. No. You did not sand the porch. Also no. You spent 3 hours with a man I specifically told you was unhealthy for our marriage. Lydia, I said, calm enough to chill soup. Terrell was never unhealthy for this marriage. He was unhealthy for your version of it. That night she used the silence. Samuel had warned me about it. Lydia's silence was not absence. It was a wet blanket dropped over every room. She moved through the house without speaking, putting cups down, carefully closing drawers, softly creating a climate of punishment. I had worked fire scenes where smoke behaved with more honesty. I made tea and watched baseball. By Tuesday, the house was humming with confusion. Lydia called Hannah in Atlanta. I knew because Hannah called the house phone 20 minutes later. Samuel had told me she avoided Lydia's cell whenever possible. Dad, she said, bright but cautious. Hey, sweetheart. A pause. You sound different. Smart girl. Children in controlled houses become weather instruments by necessity. Different, how? I asked. I don't know. Like you're standing up while talking. I nearly smiled. That sounds healthy. She went quiet. Then softer, Mom said you were acting unstable. There was the misunderstanding Lydia would feed all week. Not cruel, not controlling, not finally resisted. Unstable. A man refusing a cage is always called erratic by the person holding the latch. I'm not unstable, I said. I'm clearer than I've been in a long time. Hannah breathed out slowly. Did you really call Mr. Terrell? I did. Another pause, this one with something warm under it. Good, she said. I liked him. He made you laugh when I was little. Come home Saturday, I said. Bring Caleb if he'll come. You're inviting us, she asked. That question told me more than she meant it to. Yes. For what? Lunch? Noise. Proof that the house still has a pulse. She laughed once, then covered it with a cough. Dad, are you sure you're okay? Not all the way, I said, but better enough to start. She said she would come. Wednesday brought Caleb. He showed up after work, tie loosened, eyes alert. He stood in the driveway while I pretended to adjust a sprinkler head. Uncle Grant, he said. I did not turn right away. That boy had always been sharper than the adults gave him credit for. Took you longer than I thought, I said. He exhaled, half laugh, half disbelief. I knew Monday. What gave me away? Dad still says supper. You said dinner to Marissa Sunday night. Also, Dad holds cups with both hands. You hold them by the handle. I sighed. The cup again. Caleb smiled sadly. I used to notice stuff so I could tell what mood Mom was in. That sentence belonged in a courtroom. I looked at my nephew, a grown man with my brother's face and Lydia's caution layered over his shoulders. How long have you known he needed help? I asked. Caleb looked toward the porch that did not need painting. Since I was 13. She made him cancel a camping trip with me because the linen closet needed reorganizing. The sprinkler clicked behind us, stupid and cheerful. He had bought marshmallows, Caleb said. I remember that. He hid them in the pantry like a surprise. Then she said no, and he apologized to me like he had done something wrong. His jaw tightened. That was the first time I realized Dad lived in the house differently than we did. I need you quiet until Saturday, I said. Can you do that? Caleb looked at the windows, then back at me. Uncle Grant, I have been quiet in this family since middle school. 4 more days is not going to break my record. There was no humor in it, though. His mouth tried. I put a hand on his shoulder. Thursday morning, Lydia changed tactics. She became sweet. Not warm. Sweet. There is a difference, and every firefighter knows sugar can burn. She made pancakes, set out Samuel's favorite peach preserves, and touched my shoulder as she passed. I think we both got tense this week, she said. Maybe you should stay home today and rest. Can't, I said. I'm meeting the choir director. The spatula stopped midair. What choir director? The one you called 3 months ago. Her face went blank, then careful. I was trying to spare you embarrassment. Then you failed twice, I said. First, by making the call. Second, by thinking embarrassment was yours to manage. Her hand trembled once before she steadied it. Samuel, you don't understand how people talk. I understand exactly how people talk, I said. They talk less when you stop obeying them. I ate 2 pancakes because Nora would have asked if I was eating properly, and because Lydia needed to see that my appetite had not asked permission either. That afternoon I went to the church hall and met Director Pauline Nash. I told her Samuel wanted to audition again. She studied me with bright, suspicious eyes. Your wife said you were no longer interested. My wife was mistaken. Pauline tilted her head. Were you mistaken, or was she? I smiled. That is a bigger question than the song list. I sang 1 verse. Not beautifully. Grant Mercer can carry a tune, but Samuel was the singer. Still, our voices were close enough to open the door. Pauline listened, then said, "Tell Samuel the group rehearses Tuesday." I froze for half a second. She smiled without mercy. Honey, I directed church choirs for 42 years. I know when a man is singing in borrowed shoes. I did not deny it. Some people earn the truth by noticing it kindly. Pauline promised silence until Samuel was ready. She also said something I carried home like a coal. Control hates witnesses, she said. That is why music scares people like your sister-in-law. It gives a man breath in public. I liked Pauline immediately. Friday was the breaking day. Lydia brought out the old weapon fully loaded. At breakfast, she placed a printed list beside my plate. Porch sanding, insurance call, grocery pickup, dry cleaner, garage shelves, dinner reservation for her mother Evelyn, who was coming Saturday. I think structure will help you, Lydia said. You've been drifting. I picked up the list, read it once, and tore it in half. Not dramatically, just neatly down the center. Lydia's face changed in a way I will remember. It was not rage first. It was shock. The machine had not only stopped working, it had eaten the instruction manual. What are you doing? She whispered. Removing clutter. I stood and put both halves in the trash. Your mother is welcome Saturday. Hannah and Caleb are coming too. So is Terrell. So is Pauline from the choir. We are having lunch here. Lydia's mouth opened. You invited people without asking me. Yes, I said. That is how inviting works when the house is also yours. For the first time all week, she raised her voice. Not much, but enough to show the metal under the velvet. This is not you. I looked at her across the kitchen. That is the first honest thing you've said. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means you are right. This is not the man you trained. She stared at me for 3 long seconds. I watched the thought arrive. It did not settle fully, not yet, but it entered the room. Her eyes moved over my face, searching for seams. Samuel, she said, but now my brother's name sounded less like a command and more like a question. I did not answer. Questions should ripen before harvest. Saturday morning, Terrell arrived first carrying 2 pies and the nervous courage of a man entering enemy territory. Lydia opened the door. Her smile flickered when she saw him. Terrell, she said, making his name sound like a stain. Terrell held up the pies. Lydia. Figured if I was finally allowed back in, I should bring sugar. He walked past her before she could decide whether to block him. I nearly applauded. Hannah arrived next from Atlanta, suitcase in one hand, eyes moving through the house like someone checking for damage after a storm. She hugged me, then held on a second too long. You smell like Uncle Grant's soap, she whispered into my shoulder. Smart girl. Your father is lucky, I whispered back. She pulled away, eyes wet but steady. Where is he? Safe. That one word was enough. She nodded and went to the kitchen. Caleb and Marissa came with fruit paper plates and the expression of people ready to watch a bridge either collapse or finally open. Evelyn, Lydia's mother, arrived at noon. She was 78, thin as a church candle with silver hair pinned tight and eyes that had missed very little in this life. Lydia had invited her for reinforcement. I could see that immediately. Evelyn entered, kissed Lydia's cheek, then looked at me. Her gaze stopped. Not at my face, at my hands. Samuel, she said slowly. I reached for her hands because I did not know whether Samuel usually hugged her. Mistake. The second our palms touched, her eyes sharpened. She smiled, but the smile was for information, not pleasure. Grant, she said softly, too low for Lydia to hear. I wondered how long before one of you did something. I kept my face still. Evelyn patted my hand once and moved inside. That was the first real twist of the day. Lydia believed her mother had come to help tighten the old pattern. Evelyn had come to watch whether it could finally be broken. Sometimes the cavalry arrives wearing pearls and pretending to need a chair. By 1 o'clock the house was full. Terrell and Caleb talked on the back porch. Hannah helped Marissa set out food. Pauline arrived with lemon bars and the confidence of a woman who had corrected tenors for decades and feared no domestic dictator. Lydia moved room to room, smiling, adjusting, directing, but the room would not take her shape. That was the beautiful part. Nobody fought her. They simply stopped organizing themselves around her comfort. Terrell told a story Samuel had loved. Hannah laughed without checking the doorway. Caleb poured drinks without being assigned. Pauline asked Lydia directly where Samuel kept his music. The house for one afternoon remembered it had walls instead of rules. At 2:10 I raised a glass of iced tea. The room quieted. Lydia stood near the counter, arms folded. Evelyn sat beside Hannah, watching with eyes that did not blink much. To Samuel I said, "Wherever he is right now, he has more people waiting for him than he was taught to believe." Terrell lifted his glass first. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Nora from Savannah. "He is watching the baseball game with both feet on the coffee table." He just laughed. "Keep going." I put the phone away. When I looked up, Evelyn was staring directly at me. Recognition had finished its work. She stood slowly. "Walk with me," she said. We stepped onto the side porch. The air smelled like cut grass and heat. Evelyn looked out over the lawn Lydia had ordered Samuel to maintain like a military cemetery. For a while she said nothing. Then my daughter did not invent this. I leaned against the railing. "No," I said. "People usually inherit their cages before building them." Evelyn nodded as if I had confirmed something she already knew and hated. Her father was a gambler. Charming, useless, always promising the next month would fix the last one. I learned to control every dollar, every appointment, every friendship, because if I did not, our life fell apart. Her voice stayed even, which somehow made it sadder. Lydia watched me, Evelyn continued. She learned fear and called it responsibility. She learned grip and called it love. I told myself she was stronger than I had been. Then I watched her turn Samuel into a man who apologizes before speaking. She closed her eyes. I have been ashamed longer than I have been honest. I did not soften it for her. She had not asked me to. "Will you talk to her?" I asked. Evelyn looked toward the kitchen window where Lydia stood alone now, watching the room fail to obey her. "That is why I came," she said. "Not because she called me. Because Hannah called me after you did not sound like her father." Another twist. Hannah had not merely noticed. She had acted. This family was not as asleep as Lydia thought. It had been waiting for someone to turn on one lamp. Evelyn touched the porch railing. "Samuel deserves to come home to a different house," she said. "Or he deserves to leave this one without believing he failed." At 3:30, Samuel arrived. Nora drove him in my truck and parked behind the Toyota. I watched through the window as he stepped out wearing my old Braves cap, face nervous but clearer. The room went quiet before he reached the door, as if the house felt him coming. Lydia turned. For once, she had no performance ready. Samuel walked into his own kitchen like a man entering a church after years of standing outside. Same face as mine, yes. Same height. Same gray hair. But everyone in that room knew the difference now because they were finally looking. Hannah made a sound like a sob and crossed the room first. She wrapped both arms around her father. Caleb followed. Then Terrell. Samuel stood there, held by the life Lydia had trimmed away, and I saw something return to his shoulders. Not pride exactly. Weight. His own weight. He looked at me over Hannah's head and I stepped aside. That was the whole point. Not to become my brother. To clear enough space for him to return. Lydia stood near the counter. Her face had collapsed into something younger, frightened and angry, and humiliated all at once. "So it was him," she said, looking at me. "All week." Samuel turned toward her. "Yes," he said. His voice shook, but it did not disappear, because I did not know how to come home as myself yet. That sentence struck harder than anything I had said all week. Lydia's mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn stepped beside her daughter and touched her arm. Lydia flinched, then looked at her mother. Whatever passed between them was old. Older than Samuel. Older than the marriage. Evelyn said quietly, "Baby, this is what holding too tightly finally looks like." Lydia's eyes filled, but she fought it. "Everyone is acting like I'm some monster." Samuel shook his head. "No. We are acting like I am a person." The room went silent. Even Pauline, who looked like she had a hymn ready for every situation, lowered her eyes. Lydia stared at her husband like she had never heard his voice arrive without asking permission. "I protected this family," Lydia said, but the sentence came out weaker than she intended. Samuel nodded once. "Sometimes, and sometimes you protected yourself from the fear that someone might leave if you stopped managing their breathing." Evelyn covered her mouth. Lydia looked at her mother again, and this time she understood the inheritance in the room. I walked to the back porch because the next conversation belonged to them. Nora joined me outside a minute later. She took my hand. "How bad?" she asked. "Necessary," I said. She nodded. Through the window, I saw Samuel sit at the kitchen table. Lydia sat across from him. Evelyn sat beside her daughter. Hannah and Caleb stayed close. Some endings do not need shouting. Some need witnesses and chairs and enough quiet for truth to stop performing. I heard Lydia cry once. Not the sharp cry of a woman losing control. The low one that comes from finding the bottom of something. Samuel did not rush to fix it. That may have been the bravest thing he did all day. I left Augusta the next morning. Samuel asked me to stay, but I told him no. "This is your house or it is not," I said. "You cannot borrow my spine forever." He smiled at that tired but real. "Feels strange having one," he said. "That means it's yours," I told him. "Borrowed things feel familiar. Real things feel strange at first." A week later, Samuel called me from his kitchen, not a motel. I could hear dishes, a chair, scraping, Lydia's voice somewhere in the background, quieter than I remembered. "We had our first counseling session," he said. She went. Evelyn drove her. He gave a breath that was almost a laugh. "That woman is terrifying." "She always was," I said. "What happened?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. Lydia said she thought love meant preventing disaster. The counselor asked if she could tell the difference between disaster and disappointment. She didn't answer for a long time. I sat with that. Some questions are crowbars. Used correctly, they open rooms. Terrell and Samuel meet every other Thursday now. The choir accepted him after a second audition, his real one. Hannah came home twice that month, not because Lydia summoned her, but because Samuel invited her. Caleb asked his father to help build shelves in his garage. Not Lydia's porch. Not her list. Caleb's garage, his invitation, their time. Lydia is not fixed. People do not become free of 28-year habits because one weekend embarrassed them. Samuel is not magically healed either. Some mornings he still starts to ask permission, then stops mid-sentence like a man catching his foot on an old trap. But he stops. That matters. Freedom often begins as an awkward pause. 3 months later, I went back to Augusta for Sunday lunch. Samuel opened the door before I knocked. He looked better. Not younger. Better. There is a difference. The house smelled like roast chicken and lemon polish. Lydia came from the kitchen and looked me directly in the eye. "Grant," she said. "No performance. No sweetness. Just my name." "Lydia," I answered. "We were not friends. We may never be." But she did something I respected. She stepped aside and let Samuel lead me in. That sounds small only to people who have never watched a whole marriage depend on who stands in the doorway. I noticed Samuel's sheet music on the piano bench, visible, untouched, allowed to exist. After lunch, Caleb told a story about his father laughing at choir practice when Pauline made the bass section repeat one line 6 times. Hannah said she wished she had been there. Samuel laughed again right there at the table, unguarded and loud enough to startle himself. He did not look at Lydia first. He just laughed. Lydia looked at him when he did. Her face changed, but not with anger. Something like grief moved through her, then wonder. Maybe she was seeing what she had muted. Maybe she was mourning what her fear had cost. Maybe she was simply hearing her husband without the old filter. Whatever it was, she did not stop him. On the drive home, Nora asked whether I thought they would make it. I kept both hands on the wheel and watched the highway unroll through the Georgia dusk. "I don't know," I said. "But Samuel will." Nora nodded. That was the real victory. Not saving the marriage at all costs. Not punishing Lydia until everyone clapped. Samuel would survive either outcome. People ask if what I did was dishonest. Of course it was. I put on my brother's life and walked through his house wearing his face. But Lydia had been living inside a larger dishonesty for 28 years, calling control love and fear devotion. Sometimes truth needs a disguise long enough to get through the front door. I did not switch places with Samuel to destroy his wife. I did it to confuse the machine that had been eating him quietly. I did it so his children could see their father stand somewhere besides the shadow. I did it so his old friend could hug him again. I did it so Samuel could hear his own name without flinching. And yes, if Lydia had chosen pride over help, I would have driven Samuel back to Savannah and helped him hire the best divorce attorney in Georgia before breakfast. Do not mistake mercy for softness. I have carried men through smoke, and I know when a house can be saved and when it needs to be abandoned. For now, Samuel is home. Not fully repaired. Not magically brave. Home in a way he was not before. He sings on Tuesdays. He eats lunch with Terrell. He visits Hannah, without Lydia arranging the schedule. He tells Caleb no when he means no, and yes when he means yes. Small words, but they have grown teeth. As for me, I keep my phone loud at night. Twins do that after certain calls. Samuel says he is embarrassed it took a motel room and his brother wearing his life for a week to wake him up. I told him waking up is not shameful. Staying asleep after you know the house is burning, that is the part a man answers for. So that is what happened. I did not storm into Lydia's kitchen with a speech. I did not flip a table or expose her at church or drag the family through public disgrace. I simply walked into my brother's life, said no where he had been trained to nod, and watched the whole cage rattle itself loose. 28 years is a long time to lose your voice, but 1 week used correctly can remind a man where he left it. Samuel found his. Lydia heard it. Their children witnessed it. And me, I drove back to Savannah with my own coffee mug in my own hand, grateful that this time when my brother called from the dark, I answered before the second ring.